golden domes, Russian princesses, and two remarkable churches hidden in the heart of Germany. So I'm in Wiesbaden, Germany, famous for thermal baths, casinos, expensive cars, and then there's this, a massive Russian Orthodox church with 5 golden onion domes sitting on top of the Neuerberg. And no, the Russians did not invade Wiesbaden. This is the Russian Orthodox Church of St. Elizabeth, and there's actually a fascinating and pretty tragic reason why it's here. Back in 1844, Duke Adolf of Nassau married Grand Duchess Elizabeth Mikhailovna of Russia. And Elizabeth wasn't just some Russian aristocrat. She was a niece of Tsar Nicholas, the first emperor of Russia. So imagine meeting your wife's family and realizing Uncle Nick controls one of the largest empires on earth. Thanksgiving dinner just got considerably more stressful. Unfortunately, the marriage was incredibly short. In 1845, Elizabeth died giving birth to their first child. Their daughter also died. Elizabeth was only 18 years old. Now, when most men suffer heartbreak, we might buy a sports car, grow an inappropriate beard, or start making questionable financial decisions. Adolf was a duke, so he built a Russian Orthodox church on top of a mountain, and apparently there were instructions: make it tasteful. How tasteful? 5 golden domes. Adolf commissioned Wiesbaden architect Philip Hofmann, who actually traveled to Russia to study the Russian Orthodox architecture before designing the church, which is impressive. Today, we'd probably just Google images for 5 minutes and tell the builder, yeah, make it look Russian. The church was completed in 1855, and Adolf deliberately chose this spot high above Wiesbaden so the memorial could be seen from his palace down in Biebrich. So whenever he looked toward the Neuerberg, there it was. It's romantic, it's tragic, and it's possibly the most elaborate version of keeping a picture of your wife on the nightstand in human history. Elizabeth's magnificent marble sarcophagus inside, while Elizabeth and her infant daughter are buried beneath the church in the crypt. And this isn't just some 19th century monument that's been turned into a museum. It's still an active Orthodox church today. So let's head inside. We'll try to have a look around and see what 19th century royal grief combined with an absolutely ridiculous construction budget looks like. Inside, the church is small but absolutely packed with color, icons, gold, marble, and enough Orthodox decoration to make a Protestant church feel severely underdressed. Unfortunately, my exclusive interior tour lasted about 24 seconds before a very determined babushka informed me that filming was forbidden. Apparently there was a sign. I didn't see the sign. I'm sorry, the babushka saw me. I'm sorry if you're seeing this. And here lies Elizabeth beneath a beautiful marble monument inside the church built in her memory. She was only 18 when she died in childbirth, and her infant daughter died with her. A devastating end to a very short life. Walking around the back, you realize this is actually a surprisingly compact church beneath all that gold. But compact doesn't mean subtle. 5 gilded domes, sandstone walls, and enough Russian ornamentation to make sure nobody mistakes this for a Lutheran church. It stands high on Wiesbaden's Neuerberg, surrounded by trees, with the Russian cemetery just behind it. And this is the view that makes the whole thing work. More than 170 years later, those golden domes still dominate the hill above Wiesbaden. It started as one man's monument to his wife, but it became one of the city's most recognizable landmarks. From Wiesbaden, it's about 40 kilometers east of Darmstadt, where another piece of Imperial Russia is hiding in plain sight. Different church, different story, same golden domes, and yes, of course I picked this music for the drive. Well, 40 kilometers and an unhealthy amount of Tetris music later, we've made it to Darmstadt. And yes, there's another Russian church. But unlike Wiesbaden, this one wasn't built as a memorial. Nobody had to die to get this project approved. This is the Russian chapel of St. Mary Magdalena, and its story involves the last Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II, and possibly one of history's greatest examples of refusing to compromise while visiting the in-laws. Nicholas's wife, Empress Alexandra, was born Princess Alex of Hesse right here in Darmstadt. So when the imperial couple came to Germany to visit her family, Nicholas had a problem. He was a Russian Orthodox Tsar of an enormous empire, and his in-laws didn't have a Russian Orthodox church. Most husbands would survive a few days, smile politely, eat whatever they're served, and go home. Nicholas built a church. And because bringing your own church to the in-laws wasn't quite enough, he actually had Russian soil brought here so the chapel could stand on Russian earth. Think about that. The man basically arrived in Darmstadt and said, "Your city is lovely, your family's lovely, but I've brought my own church and a little bit of Russia too." And considering how things eventually turned out for Nicholas and Alexandria, this beautiful little chapel is also one of the last surviving reminders of a royal world that was about to disappear forever. So now that we've established Nicholas brought his own church and technically some of Russia with him to Darmstadt, let's actually take a look at this thing, because for what was basically the Tsar's personal vacation chapel, they did not phone this one in. Nicholas commissioned Leonti Benoit, one of the leading Russian architects of his generation, to design it. And if the name Benoit sounds French rather than Russian, that's because his family had French roots. By this point, though, the Benoit family had become something of a Russian artistic dynasty. Construction began in 1897, and the chapel was completed in 1899. Nicholas II paid for the project himself,
which is probably easier when your job title is Emperor of all Russia. There was no GoFundMe. The building was designed in a distinctly Russian style with elaborate brickwork, decorative stone, mosaics, Orthodox crosses, and of course those golden onion domes. Because if you're going to build a Russian Orthodox church in the middle of Germany, subtlety really isn't the objective. And notice how small it actually is. This wasn't meant to become Darmstadt's enormous new cathedral. It was essentially an imperial private chapel, built so that Nicholas and Alexandra could attend Orthodox services while visiting her family. But they brought in serious artistic talent. The exterior mosaics were created to designs by the Russian artist Viktor Vaznetsov, one of the greatest names in Russian religious and historic art. This wasn't some prefabricated royal garden shed with an onion dome stuck on top. Nicholas was building something that was supposed to look and feel authentically Russian.
And then, of course, there's the detail I still can't get over, the Russian soil. So underneath this little piece of Imperial Russia in Darmstadt is quite literally a little piece of Russia. All of this effort because Nicholas wanted somewhere appropriate to go to church when he visited his family. Most men bring a bottle of wine to the in-laws. Nicholas II brought an architect, some dirt, and a construction budget. To be fair, the result is pretty spectacular. You'll notice there's no footage from inside this one. After Wiesbaden, where I lasted about 20 seconds before being intercepted by a very determined babushka, I learned my lesson. No filming means no filming. I respect the rules and fear the babushkas, so the camera stayed outside. Now, if you've watched this channel before, you know I normally find some excuse to talk about Rome. Well, today I don't even have to try. Nicholas II's Russia inherited a powerful connection to the Eastern Roman world. After Constantinople fell in 1453, Sophia Palaeologia, niece of the last Roman emperor Constantine XI, married Ivan III of Moscow. That marriage helped connect Moscow to the prestige and symbolism of the old Roman Empire, eventually feeding the idea that Moscow is the third Rome. So we started with a Russian church in Germany, built for a Tsar visiting his German in-laws, and somehow we're back in Rome. I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. After a day of Tsars, golden domes, and somehow ending up back in Rome, there was only one thing left to do. The Romanovs are gone. Constantinople has fallen. But the beer, it's still cold. Cheers, or Nastrovia.